Welcome back. The Pentagon needs to improve the quality of its property record data to get to a clean audit. The Government Accountability Office finds a department-wide strategy to address real property control issues would help. Kristen Kociolek is director at the Government Accountability Office. Kristen, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. What specifically were you supposed to look at regarding the way that the Pentagon keeps track of its real property?
Hi, Francis. Thanks for having me. We did this audit as part of our role as the group auditor for the consolidated financial statements of the federal government. And so as part of that, we perform oversight of the financial audits that are done at the Department of Defense. And in this particular audit, we were focused on looking at the real property, like you mentioned. And what that entails is the land, the building, and the structures that the department maintains. And what we found is that the department could really benefit from continuing to address the underlying internal control issues that are being identified by the Inspector General, as well as the other independent public accountants that are performing the financial audits. And to do that, continuing those efforts, and like you mentioned, really doing it in a department-wide strategy, as opposed to having each of the individual services and components do things on their own.
You use a phrase here, Kristen, that I've learned over the years is a red flag, basically, in a GAO work, and that is a leading practice that the Pentagon is not following here. And in this case, a leading practice for enterprise-wide real property management is this comprehensive department-wide strategy. Are there strategies in parts of the department that are not in use all over the place, or is there not a strategy at all anywhere in the department for collecting this real estate data?
What we found is that there are services and components that are putting things into place to address these issues. But exactly what you mentioned, there's not a department-wide strategy that's going to help them bring it all together and leverage efficiencies that could be had. Certainly, as you noted and mentioned, leading practices, certainly GAO is not the only organization that has pointed this out. The Inspector General has emphasized the importance of a department-wide strategy. The Defense Business Board has mentioned that as well. And even the department itself, the management there, has mentioned that a department-wide strategy really would help them to leverage efficiencies and bring things together at the end. Ultimately, they are required to have the consolidated financial statement audit at the department-wide level. And so as much as they can do to be consistent among the services and the components will really help them do that without having to go through a lot of adjustments and things at the end, to the extent that the different folks are doing it inconsistently.
I'm sure the reason that you want the department to have a strategy is not just so they have a strategy. What are they missing out on by not having a strategy and by not getting this data collated, collected, curated in a way that's beneficial to the department?
Right, exactly. That's a great point. And not having a strategy for the sake of a strategy. What having good real property data will help them do is not only be able to have auditable financial statements, which is certainly important and a goal of the department, but having that data available and reliable on an ongoing basis will help department management be able to make decisions throughout the course of transactions as property is added, as property is disposed, to the extent that those types of transactions can be recorded accurately in the record as they occur, so that management has that information available if they are making decisions about needs for new assets or the need to dispose of assets. They have reliable data to do that. They'd also be able to better plan for maintenance costs. For example, if they're having data in their records that's indicating they have assets that really no longer exist, they don't want to be planning and budgeting for maintenance costs for those assets, for example. So having a strategy, a department-wide strategy that will help them have this accurate information on an ongoing basis really help the department overall get a good picture of what they have, what they need, and be able to make good decisions.
Kristen, you mentioned that there are some departments, some places in the military that are doing this. Would it be as simple as taking one of those examples and scaling it across the entire department? Or is that maybe not, is it not a one-size-fits-all thing necessarily?
In some ways, I think they can take what they've learned at certain agencies and apply that across the board. Certainly, we hear that the various components and services have things that are unique about them, but there's also a lot of similarities. And so, to the extent they can leverage what is similar and be able to leverage that and gain some efficiencies so that each organization is not having to do it on their own, I think would definitely help. One example where we found that is in the existence and completeness verifications that the various components and services undertook in 2019 and 2020 in response to the audit priorities coming out of the 2018 audit. And in that case, there was a department-wide directive that required all the different organizations to do a complete existence and completeness verification and really looking to make sure if they had property recorded in the records, did it really exist? And conversely to that, if they had property that existed, making sure that it was in the records. And we actually went out and looked at 4 different installations and found that they were all doing something, but they were all doing things a little bit differently. And to the extent that they could have leveraged from each other or had a consistent policy that they were following, it would have resulted in better comparable results across the government and truly across the department rather, and really help them to get to the goal of having a real property baseline department-wide, as opposed to having things a little bit different in each service and component.
Kristen, thanks very much for coming on. I appreciate your insight today.
Thank you.